Hi, Joe.
Good afternoon, sir.
How are you?
Good.
Good, good.
I have all your pictures. So I think I put them all in the folder in my Gmail account, and that way I could just share that screen there and we could open them up as needed.
Okay, right. But we can just do it by those date blocks. Is that the easiest way to do it?
Whatever you want to do. I got from 66 all the way up to 2000 and then some other project.
Yeah.
I didn't realize you designed my my Thule roof rack carrier. So,
well, yeah, it depends which one it is, but quite a few of them, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's great. Carried all my ski equipment.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Well, I can't claim to have invented them, but I mean, but the styling aspect of it, yeah. We did a lot of wind tunnel testing on the earlier designs, which was very interesting.
There's Bob. Bob's usually here. Bob was ready. Bob was ready at 3 o'clock this morning.
All right. Perhaps he's fallen asleep.
Let's see here. Let's see. Bob Perry, there he is. All right. Let's see if I can do this. Yeah, I can do that kind of easily. All right. Easy peasy. And you'll see Bob, and he'll be buried in the corner because he doesn't center himself in the right in the camera well.
It's okay.
There you are, Bob. Unmute yourself.
That hit share. Do I hit share screen or not?
You are not allowed to share screen. Actually, in this meeting right now, you can share screen if you want, because I'm not letting anybody in. Do you need to share something?
No.
Okay.
I'm just you can hear me, Julian?
Yeah, hi Bob. Yeah. We meet in a virtual world.
Yeah, we do. Did you have some good bubble? And oh, you haven't had breakfast. What time is it over there?
What, in the UK?
Yeah.
No, it's coming up for dinner time. It's supper, you know, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Oh yeah. I did a project over there a few years back with trying to think of the name of the boatyard. They're long since defunct. There it was in the Tunbridge Wells area.
Oh, right. Oh, crikey, yeah.
Yeah, they're the ones that built those.
Tyler,
exactly.
Yeah.
Did a custom boat for me. They did okay. I went over a couple times during that. You know, I just loved it there. Other than I was over there one time. I took my wife over. It was the week that they thought the dollar and the pound would go parity, right?
Oh, right.
So everything. I went to Savile Row. I bought a nice tweed jacket. I rented a BMW for a week. I think it was the BMW was like $42 a day for rent. I did struggle a bit with the driving. I learned that I couldn't have 2 beers with my lunch and drive.
Because the beer was so strong, you mean?
The beer was so strong, and pints are big. They're quite a bit bigger than our pints, aren't they, Joe?
They are.
Yeah. But I love the food. I really felt like I was at home. I really just felt very, very, very comfortable there.
Well, I did some of my American tours in the time when the pound and the dollar were at 2.3. So again, bombing around California with next to no money and living in 5-star hotels. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, we stayed in the Crescent in Bath.
Oh, right. Wonderful. Nice. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And had a good time. And my plan when we went there was to drive from London to Scotland.
So what year was that then?
I don't know. It was close to 30 years ago.
All right. Yeah.
And so I figured, I know over here you can drive 300 miles a day easily. That's a comfortable days. So I figured I'd go to England and 300 miles a day. Well, it turned out that I was struggling to make 100 miles a day because there were so many times I wanted to stop. So we never got to Scotland, but got to Salisbury.
Infamous place now.
That's where my hi-fi gear comes from. So
all right.
Name gear.
Oh yeah.
My turntable comes from Scotland, but we had a heck of a good time there.
That's good. Yeah. So Tyler's were really a molding company there. So they built your boat as well, did they, or just the hull?
They built it as a one-off, and they built the hull, and then they called in subcontractors to finish it, and it was a real, to use an American term, it was a real shit show.
Yeah. I've had plenty of those.
Yeah, going from subcontractor, one subcontractor to the next subcontractor, and people have come to me since and with the idea, well, we'll get the hull built here and the interior built there, and we'll save money. And I tell them it never works. It's because each subcontractor isn't getting what he thought he was getting, and it's just not a comfortable situation. So Wave Train was 35 years ago, right?
1988. Yeah, designed it in 87. Yeah, so yes, 34 years ago. Yeah.
And what was your primary? What's the word I want here? Come on, your primary
goal or
no, not objective? Goal. No, the thing you're in your mind that you had.
Well, sorry to disappoint you, but I didn't
influence.
I didn't have any. I do like commissions. I mean, as opposed to having bright ideas. So I actually like responding to what clients want. So again, this was just an abstract collection of things. He was a client who I was trying to design an Admiral's Cup boat for, and he owned an Admiral's Cup boat, but he'd kind of gotten fed up with the whole thing of having loads of crew and the cost, blah, blah, blah. And so at various meetings, and I helped him start a boat selling agency called Opal Marine. And then at the end of various meetings, he just sort of said, well, I guess Julian's done enough for us now. We ought to build one of his boats. And so I thought, oh, that's nice. And so he said, what I want is a boat I can sail with, race with only 4 crew. I want it to be super stable. I don't want to have anybody hanging over the side. And I want it to look like a dragon. And that, and of course, that gave me the picture within minutes. I mean, I'd got the boat designed in my head, given that. And so really just kind of taking that and drawing it out was, it designed itself. It was just simple, low freeboard. That was the Dragon influence. It could be virtually flush deck because it didn't need an interior or headroom or anything. It was all about aesthetics. So the boat was entirely driven by aesthetics. No rating rule, of course. And then the other thing that designed it was the request for high stability. So we'd already done some work on bulb keels with backlash a few years earlier. And I thought, well, it's a model yacht, isn't it? That's the answer. Just stick a huge bulb on the bottom, tiny keel, a canard as well. So that we were just experimenting with that. And as I say, it sort of designed itself, really. And it certainly wasn't preconceived in any manner whatsoever.
I know exactly what you mean. I don't have ideas either.
No.
My ideas are just pure reaction to the client's requirements, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Left alone to my own devices, I'm a pretty dull boy. When you started working when the RORC was still being used, right?
Yeah, I did.
How old were you then?
Well, I mean, it sounds ridiculous, I know, but my first actual design work that went sailing, as it were, was a re-rig and re-keel and interior design on a boat, and that was in 1966, so I was 15.
Wow.
And a couple of 3 years later, that one of those, it was a production boat, which my father, he didn't build it originally, but he built it in central London, which was about, I don't know, 200 yards from the school I went to school at. And after school, I'd go and help build these things. But at the boat show, he took it to the London Boat Show in '67, and one of the boats he built. And I took time off at the beginning of term, and I got well, basically, to cut a long story short, I got expelled. I ended up, my father saying, "Well, now what do you want to do?" He said, I still want to be a yacht designer." And he said, "Well, I can't help you with that, but I can help you become a journalist," because he was a writer. So, yeah, that's what happened. And then that same boat, I ended up equipping it to race it, and raced it in 1968 at the tender age of 17, I suppose. Not terribly successfully. It wasn't really a racing boat anyway, but it was an interesting learning curve. The only that was to the RORC rule, of course. So with that, hence the rig modifications and everything had to comply with the rule. It was a yawl rig boat as well, so which was pretty odd. And then the other thing that I did, really, the only other RORC influenced thing, was a project which I did, which was viewed by John Illingworth, which was a huge thrill for me, because he was one of my heroes, and it was based very much on it. You couldn't tell it apart from an Illingworth boat, to be honest with you, and so it was limited to that. So yeah. RORC rule experience actually with doing the re-rig on my father's boat, and the keel and things. But other than that, it was more academic, really. And
how old were you when you were actually supporting yourself as a yacht designer?
Well, very small amounts of money, but I mean, I started to earn a bit of money from it in 1970. That's when things really kicked off. But of course, my primary job was as a journalist. I was writing.
Were you working for Seahorse then?
No, I was working for the Yachting and Boating, which was a weekly newspaper.
Uh-huh.
And Seahorse came in. I think I worked there 73 through 75. I think. So I was doing both. I was being a journalist and designing boats as well at the same sort of time, really. And yeah, which had its problems. I mean, I desperately wanted to get out of writing because I thought it got in the way. But of course, it also provided some means to earn money. I mean, to go sailing, really. Because I had the family, we have no sailing background. So, I mean, this was all sort of, my brother and I very much self-started this. I mean, we got our parents to take us on the Norfolk Broads when we were young children, when I was about 7, I suppose. And my parents, well, my father really got into sailing from that. But I mean, we lived in central London. There was no sort of connection with yacht clubs, people that sailed or anything like that. So it was all a bit, well, it's either do it your own way or not at all.
Yeah. So you had no formal training.
No, none at all. Skeins elements of yacht design.
Well,
do we want to carry this conversation on with the rest of the crew? It's 11 my time.
Sure.
All right. I got everybody that they can't mute themselves and or can't unmute themselves. So I'll announce that when we get in and tell them we'll just unmute people, you know, after Julian gets to his presentation and we go through the Q&A session. That way, I'm not going to
do a presentation.
All right. Well, then we'll just start. Let's just see what happens. We'll get everybody in here and see what happens. All right. Everybody's coming in. Good morning, everybody. I have everybody right now just muted until we get moving here, and then I'll release the feature so people can talk. But I know Bob's going to want to introduce Julian, and we'll get moving. And once everybody settles in, I'll release the feature. Good morning, everyone, and I'll turn it over to Bob.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. This is our 6th episode of the Excellence in Yacht Design series, which was an idea that came to me one Monday morning when I was sitting looking at the fan club page thinking, I need to do something to spice this up a little bit. And just out of the blue, I had this idea, let's do this series. And I've had a lot of suggestions of who to have on, but I'm not paying any attention to those suggestions. This was my idea. I will pick the guys that suit my criteria. And I don't even know what my criteria is. It's just a gut feel for people who have done work that I admire. And we have Julian Everitt this morning for the 6th episode. Why Julian? Well, it's a name I've known, it seems like, for as long as I've been involved in yacht design. And now that I talk to him a little bit, I understand why, because he's been around longer than I have. He started designing professionally when he was 15 years old. Think about that for a minute. And like, I was just thinking about it. Like all the other guys, I don't think we've had anybody on who had actual formal university training or schooling in yacht design. Everybody sort of just decided they wanted to be a yacht designer and then made it up as they went along from there. And Julian certainly probably gets the award for who started the earliest. Julian's worked with the RORC rule, which was the rule that combined with the America's CCA rule to produce the IOR. So he worked with the RORC, he worked with the IOR. And when you look at his work in the IOR, which I might be wrong, but it's actually still going on today, because all of a sudden these IOR level classes, quarter tonners and half tonners and 1-tonners, they're sort of going through a resurgence of popularity in Europe, and proof that they weren't the awful boats that some people cracked them up to be. They, in most cases, they're pretty darn good boats. Well, that's fun to see. And as you look at Julian's work through the IOR, I don't know if this insults him or not, but there's almost not a single design feature or trend that popped up in the IOR that Julian didn't put his hand to at one point or another. And let's see if this works. So that's an amazing run of boats. Julian's done cruising boats. He's got some sexy power boats that are built in, I think, Saudi Arabia or Dubai or something, right?
Dubai, yeah.
And he was editor of Seahorse magazine. If you've never seen a Seahorse magazine is the one magazine you'd find in just about every serious yacht design office. It was far more technical than most magazines and very businesslike. And you just really were excited when the new Seahorse came in the mail. For some odd reason, Julian turns out to be the guy that owns the Thule car top carriers. That my son has 2 of those. And I'd like to hear that story. But it didn't surprise me when I found that out, because I've always looked at the shape and thought, somebody knew something about aerodynamics when they drew this. And the boat that stands out when you look at Julian's body of work is the boat Wave Train that he designed about 35 years ago. And when you look at Wave Train, you wonder, where the hell did those ideas come from 35 years ago? And before you guys got on, I asked Julian, where did the influence come from Wave Train? And he said, well, there really was no influence. It was just a response to a client's requirements. And I can relate to that, because, you know, without client requirements, I just sit here and stare at YouTube. You know, you need a client to motivate you, provide that impetus to get your ideas down, and then those requirements become your ideas. And the Wave Train, I think it has 2 rudders, right?
No, it has a canard. I mean, which is retractable.
But no twin rudders.
No.
Oh, okay. So, but other than that, you look at this boat and say, whoa, that is a remarkable boat for being 35 years old, and it still races, right?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So I think with that, we'll just turn it over to Julian and see where it goes from here. And maybe we'll go for an hour. Maybe we'll go for 2 hours. You know, the record, Charlie Morgan holds the record for 3 hours, Julian. He's 92 years old. So, you know, you're going to have to step up and beat Charlie.
I'm going to step up, aren't I? Yeah. Well, I hadn't kind of thought to do it as a presentation, but I mean, I suppose starting at the beginning is not necessarily a bad thing. And thank you for that very kind introduction, Bob. I mean, it's kind of funny. Just one thing is that it throughout this career and throughout so on, you meet certain fellow designers and you get to know them really well. I'm very privileged to have known Olin Stevens very well. He even offered me a job, and I knew Doug very well, and Ron Holland, and so on, and for a variety of different reasons. But Bob and I have really never met particularly. I don't know I think you were probably working for Dick Carter when I did my tour of the East Coast of America wearing my journalist hat in 1972, I think it was, or 71. And I saw Dick was one of the people I came to kind of interview about what he was up to and so on. But anyway, it's fascinating that there are a lot of us out there, actually, which is really surprising. And this may sound like a digression, but because we're using the internet to communicate these days, Facebook's been an absolute eye-opener, this whole thing, because it's kind of opened doors which certainly didn't exist to me as a up-and-coming designer. I mean, the idea, the history, or the ability to see what other people have done, I mean, is astonishing now. And it's made me feel quite humble, really, because you realize that, you know, there are the headline yacht designers out there and so on who get written about a lot, et cetera, but there are a staggering number of boats that have been built, designed and so on over the last 50 odd years or longer, really, that there was really no access to. And all of a sudden now you can find out all sorts of incredible stuff, and inspiration, bit bit too late for me, but I mean, I often think, crikey, if I was a young yacht designer now, I could access so much information and interpret some really old ideas and use them in a way that was simply not available. Anyway, it's a slight digression, but no, I started this whole thing off. I mean, I didn't come from a sailing background at all. My brother, who's 3 years older than me, we pestered our parents to take us sailing on the Norfolk Broads, which is an inland waterway area in the United Kingdom. And the family got into sailing from that. And my first inspiration about design and where I wanted to do with my life came again at the age of 7 when I was watching Scepter, UK America's Cup Challenger in 1958, watching it leave harbour for a training session. And I thought, oh, that's what I'd like to do, win the America's Cup. And didn't occur to me how or anything like that. I mean, I was only 7 and so on, and it was a few years later. I mean, about 12 when I cut school and so on. I thought I want to design boats. And I mean, I cannot tell you where it came from, really. I mean, I was just fascinated with sailing, I suppose. And I was fascinated also with the work of a guy most of you may not have heard of, but I mean, a small boat designer called Robert Tucker. And there were yacht designers and boat builders around immediately after the Second World War in the early 50s and so on that really made the sport we all love now. They made it. They created it. They created massive ranges of boats in the United States as well, but I mean in the UK and Europe, little family boats, and they sold in thousands, these things. And there are various classes in the United States as well that fall into this category from the same era, sort of late 50s and so on. And that all fascinated me, and I thought, I want a piece of this action, and so that really inspired me. And then my father ended up building some boats, which he built in rather bizarrely in the centre of London. I don't know, those of you who know London, his boatyard was about a mile from Marble Arch, just near Oxford Street. Incredible. It was in a car parking garage. Anyway, he built 3 or 4 boats there. And I was at school, and my school was literally 200 yards away. And I would help out after school and so on. And then I got my involvement with the boat building, got me kicked out of school because I attended a boat show and I was supposed to be at school, and that wasn't appreciated. So exit school. And but that really got me focused on what I wanted to do. I mean, I learned a bit about boat building and so on, and my father said, well, you know, we want to modernize this boat, and here's this 15-year-old kid, and he's trust me to interpret the then RORC rule, redesign the rig, redesign the keel, and as another aside, do an interior design. And that's the boat he built, which, you know, was fantastic, really, although, you know, at the time it just seemed like the most natural thing in the world. That then really got me started. I was then very privileged to design on paper only a boat which John Illingworth was very kindly wrote a review on for one of the UK yachting magazines. And that encouraged me to think, well, you know, if he likes it, mind you, I have to admit it was a carbon copy of something that he might have designed. But you know, it was good to know that perhaps I did have an eye for it, and it was somebody being objective about that. So that encouraged me, and then I guess the next couple of years and so on, I wanted to actually get out sailing. So I'd become a journalist when I left school. My father said, well, I can't help you become a boat designer because I don't know anything about it. And I don't know how you would even begin to do that. But you can become a journalist. because he was a writer and he helped me. And so I got a job. Again, a lot of these things are like synchronicity or whatever. You get lucky in life, or timing and circumstances. And it just so happened, just when I needed it, it was a brand new yachting magazine coming out in the UK. And I got a job on that as a T-boy for the remarkable sum of £6 a week salary. And but again, it's a start, and you know, that allowed me to get things kicked off, and then I raced my father's boat. I mean, and we didn't have a great deal of success with it, but it was an experience and so on. And all the while, I was really mainly practicing, or practicing is probably the right word, being a writer. And that was useful because I did boat reviews, boat tests and so on, got to see a lot of other people's work and so on. And I got to travel too. And I mean, I got to travel to regattas, and that's when I was starting to meet other yacht designers and so on, and ringing them up and saying, what are you up to, kind of thing. And then again, circumstances, I suppose, and through publicity and through various things like that, I got a commission for my first IOR boat, which was in 1970, which was a 29-foot kind of cruiser racer, half-tonner, really. That was a pretty exciting thing. I didn't get paid for it. It was supposed to be done on a royalty basis. But then they only built one boat, so but that became fairly typical for the course. And in a way, it kind of what happened next became very much the way that my career has gone on. I mean, I got to meet Doug Peterson a few years later, and I mean, really, the comparison between the two of us is so stark. I mean, in terms of the opposite, that it would be hard to appreciate. I mean, to cut to that quickly, I mean, Doug said to me when right at the height of, the beginning of his career, so I'm thinking, he'd won the one-ton cup, so we're probably 74, 75 kind of era. And he said, do you know something about this thing? You have to control your owners. If you get a bad owner, you're basically, your career is screwed. It's all about making sure that that the owner's got good backing, good crew, good helmsman, good sails, good this, good that, good the other. And of course, it's funny, really. He was in the extraordinary position of being able to do that because he'd got so many people asking him for boats that he could turn people away. But then, some of us, or whatever, some of our careers start in different ways. And mine started very much for no particular reason, but with home building. And I don't mean kind of boats designed for home building, but I mean from people that kind of had an idea that they wanted a, whatever it was, a 20, 30 foot, even a 60-foot boat. But they were prepared to build it themselves, whatever that actually meant, in terms of whether they built it on a beach like Windward Passage or whether they, had a shed somewhere and what happened. But what they didn't have was a drawing. So again, it's funny how you get these people who contact you. But I mean, that's where, again, some early designs of mine happened, and which was variety, but unlike Doug, I had absolutely no control over where they were, what they were going to be used for, whether they were going to race successfully, if in fact they were going to be built properly. I mean, which of course is an issue. But as I say, our paths all start for different reasons and different directions and so on. So but I was always, as all pretty much most yacht designers anyway, who choose to want to create performance boats, you've got to build a winning boat, or you've got to persuade somebody to build it for you. In the end, I mean, I say in the end, but by 1971, so a year or so later, I just got to the point where that wasn't happening. So I thought, I'm going to have to do this myself. So I designed, I suppose it's possibly my first relatively well-known boat, but a half-tonner called Strawberry Fields. And in order to finance that, I again wrote a series of articles on building it. And so that which were published and so on. And that created, quite a lot of interest from people who wanted to do the same. Which again gave me an opportunity as a designer to modify it, build, and for other people to build to the same drawings or developments of it. So that worked out pretty well, and that boat was again quite successful. It was certainly successful from the point of view that it created somebody who built a sister ship to it, called No Expectations, and then another one called Helter Skelter, and another one called Strawberry Dragon. And in their various different ways, those customers, the guy that built Strawberry Dragon became an extremely good client of mine, and ended up building over the years, I think, 4 boats to my design, for basically for his family to sail. So the as I say, it was our paths to how we get to where we, our journey do start in these very different ways. And if there's a regret, I suppose, is with it all, is if for whatever reason you end up like I did, building the boat. I wish I hadn't. I mean, and you also end up being responsible for sailing it. And boy, there is nothing worse than racing a boat which you've designed, and when you're being judged for the design, when actually what's being judged is your ability to sail well. And you sit there, at the helm or whatever, and with your crew, and thinking, my God, I wish I'd got Paul Elvstrom on the stick, because things would be very different. But and it's just the way things were, really. So I mean, but I can't complain, because I got quite a lot of work out of it. And again, so while this was all going on, I carried on writing for Yachting and Boating Weekly, and then I became the editor of Seahorse. And that was interesting, because around that time, I met people like Olin Stevens, Ron Holland, Doug Peterson, and so on. I mean, actually, Ron, it's great, because he and I go back to the very beginning. And I mean, I was in my office at Seahorse, and this guy walks in with his cowboy boots and all the rest of it, and said, "I'm Ron Holland. You've never heard of me, I suspect, but I design boats, and but I've just come from San Diego, and a mate of mine, Doug Peterson, has just won the selection trials in San Diego for American one-ton cup team, or the West Coast side part of it." And I said, "Oh, that's an interesting story. Tell me about it." So he did, and actually he wrote the piece, because he's a good writer, and from that point on, I mean, Ron and I became friends, and I published in Seahorse and Yachting and Boating which effectively introduced Doug to Europe. This kind of story of which I probably everybody knows, but it's worth repeating. I mean, he designed a boat, again, limited funds. Carl Eichenloh in San Diego built it. Nobody took it very seriously. Ted Turner is famously for saying that, let the kid race. I mean, you can bolt some lead on the deck to make it rate properly, but it's a no-hoper. Of course, as we all know, I mean, the boat dominated the trials and went on to be selected for the American team, and then went on to, it didn't win the one-ton cup in '73, but it just as well might have done. So, yeah, interesting memories with other designers and getting to know them. And it was in that period as well that Olin offered me a job. I mean, he wanted me to be a trainee engineer, and but I'd already started building strawberry fields, and I'd got, you know, friends and people involved in doing that, and so I had an enviable job, if you like, or whatever, of turning down a job offer from Olin Stevens. And I often wonder, you know, well, you know, in parallel universe terms or sliding doors terms, what if? But anyway, that was not to be. But I learned a lot, you know, from Olin. I mean, you know, we spent quite a lot of time together, meetings with the ITC, International Technical Committee, for the IOR rule, and various other things over the years. And just another little story. I was watching the North American 1 ton cup trials on a boat, spectator boat, with Olin, and we're chatting about this and that. And he said he'd got a 1 tonner out there called Columbine, and he said I really like that boat. And he said, but you know, it's just a blown up version of a 1/4 tonner we did called the North Star. And I thought, oh right, okay, so even the great Olin Stevens admits to the ultimate rubber ruler boat, but you know, it fair point if you like the look of something. And I mean, so I remember a few years later we did the same thing. We literally designed a 1/2 tonner, which was quite quick, called an Eliminator, and then we got a commission for a 1 tonner. And the 1 tonner is literally built from the same drawings, just from a different scale. Which reminds me again of a little story with Doug. I mean, you know, he said, well, one of the ways that we optimize our 1 tonners and our boats, you know, is that we just use the same lines plan, and we just increase or decrease the station spacing. Mm-hmm. Fair enough, you know. And so lots of tricks of the trade. And of course, again, in those amazing days when some of us, I mean, were designing more boats than you could shake a stick at. I mean, you know, people like Ron and Doug and so on, there wouldn't have been enough hours in the day to design them in the total sense of the word. And of course, it was normal just to literally design a boat with a lines plan, a deck plan, maybe a rig, a keel, rudder. The construction looked after itself. And as for details like hatches, well, I mean, even the great Olin Stevens said, you know, we don't bother about things like that. I mean, we have what he used to call type plans. I'm only regaling these stories because it kind of sets the tone for how I just elected to kind of run my business. And I thought, well, okay, if they can get away with, you know, skimping the detail, as it were, and saying, well, you wouldn't want a boat builder to build your boat unless they knew how to build a hatch. Which was, I thought, well, that's fair enough, I guess. But anyway, I guess it all shaped the way I approach things in the early days. I hasten to add that's all changed now a lot. I mean, the computer era, which sort of began, well, for me, I suppose, Wave Train era is one of the first boats that was designed on a so-called on a computer. So we're looking at 87, that kind of era.
What program did you use then?
You're asking me. Max Surf. Again, it's one of these things that it's circumstances again. At that time, I had an office in Cowes on the Isle of Wight, and a guy came in, and he was the inventor of Max Surf, and he said, I want to show you something. And of course, I knew nothing about computers. I knew nothing about anything like that. And he gave me a demonstration, and I thought, okay, I rather like the look of this, because it does the one thing that designers never have. It gives you time to look at things and options. And that's what appealed to me. But I thought, it's terribly arrogant, I'll admit it, but I thought, I'm not going to bother to learn about any of this. I'm going to get someone else to do it. And I'm going to, which is in fact, you know, have to admit is the way I'd always run my design office. I mean, the drawings were tended to be done by draftsmen rather than by me. And because I was too lazy, and my excuse was, well, you can't have a decent overview if you're bent over a thing, looking at it all the time and worrying about, worrying about the detail again. And also you've got a business to run. So the idea, which came very much from, again, knowing Olin Stevens so well and so on, and is that, if you could afford it, surround yourself with a team of people. And I'd sort of another company, another philosophy I liked very much was the French designers Group Fino. And I thought, I love the way they operate, and so again, I wanted to model my design business on that kind of approach. And I didn't want to get too head into the business of actually drawing the things or whatever. And I decided to adopt the same philosophy with in the sort of computer era. So if you ask me a question about software or anything like that, about how this boat or that boat was designed, I'd probably have to say I haven't a clue, or I certainly don't remember. But I had some great people work for me. I mean, which is another delight of the business. I mean, and I'm also thrilled to pieces that quite a few of the guys that work for me went on to become successful yacht designers or successful in the marine business, in later life, which is gratifying. It's quite nice, so. But I suppose where we're at with this was that computers gave you time. Of course, that turned out to be a complete myth, because all we ended up doing was spending more time thinking about the way it should be. And of course, it also building responsibilities for production methodology and designing a production type processes and so on suddenly became much more the prerogative of the naval architect. So I guess most of us who were practicing in the 1990s and still today have got much higher levels of actual design work to do than compared to how things were in I don't really know how they were in the 60s, but I mean in the 70s and 80s and so on, where again it's often joked about the proverbial back of a envelope design, but there was a certain truth to that. And certainly if you had a winning formula and you wanted to, and you had boat yards or owners from different parts of the world wanting the same boat, I think most of us were probably expedient enough to think, well, we'll just send them the basic drawings and let them get on with it.
You had a lot of success with some small, well, they sort of like J24 type little racer cruiser E-boat one, right?
E-boat, yeah. E-boat, yeah.
How many they build of those?
Well, I think about 400 odd, which again, sadly by American terms is not a huge number, but in European terms it's quite a big number. And it started from scratch. So, I mean, there was no kind of base upon the owner base or anything like that. It was a completely new thing, as it were, new designer, pretty much, new boatyard, and to an extent, a new concept. I mean, there have been offshore one designs throughout history. I mean, the one that comes to mind is a boat called the South Coast One Design, which was around in the early 50s. So the idea of building a series of boats which were, to all intents and purposes, identical wasn't anything new. But the idea of designing it and marketing it and promoting it from the outset as an offshore one design, capable of racing IOR and doing all of that stuff, was a fairly new idea in 1974, and but it does, it makes life complicated because you end up alienating people that want to change it. You say, well, I'm sorry, you can't, so they don't buy it. So again, it can limit the number of, if people don't buy into the idea of a one design or fleet racing, then you lose them as customers. But yeah, the other thing that happened in my career, which again wasn't planned, but I ended up having started off by building some one-offs and boats like the half tonner, and which led to other one-off boats and so on. I then things took off on the production boat market, and that was pretty much courtesy of the e-boat. And then I, ended up being, I don't know, at one point at the end of in 1980, 81, I think I'd got something like 18 different designs in series production in the UK.
Wow.
And immediate European and Switzerland and where else? I'm not sure. I think that's about it. Mainly in the UK. It was an explosion of interest, and all based on that project, basically on the e-boat, and everybody wanted a slice of the action. I mean, or something similar, if you like. And
that was what year when that started?
It was designed in 74, and we built it started life actually as a sponsored class for Dunhill.
Do we have an e-boat image we can put up?
Yeah, it's in the file. The 72. That's it. Yeah, bingo.
Makes me sick.
Why is that?
Oh, so many of them there. The other thing is, you were a really early champion of the fractional rig. And that's a great looking boat.
Now that's actually taken recently. That's taken in 2020 of some kids. They are kids too, from a school in London, and racing an e-boat. And they actually won some races in the junior offshore group in last year with it, and that's the picture taken last year. So that's a good example of these old IOR boats still hanging on in there.
Yeah. And what did that rate?
Well, the mini ton hadn't been invented then. It was, but it was the IOR minimum rating was 16 feet, and I decided that trying to optimize a boat to a limit where there was no high limit or low limit was practically impossible. So I arbitrarily decided to pitch the rating at 16.3 feet. So yeah, we used to give. When we raced the first boat in the Solent in 75, that was, there were no other boats that size. There were quarter tonners, loads of quarter tonners. I mean, the quarter ton fleet in 75 in the Solent ran to something like 70 or 80 boats on a weekend, just the quarter tonners. And we were this only little mini, well, we weren't a mini tonner because it hadn't been invented, but this thing that was rated 2 foot less. And yeah, it was fun because, of course, they hated us when we were coming in afterwards and beating them and so on. But just on rating, so it was fun. Yeah,
and that was a fractional rig from the beginning.
No, she was masthead, and again, very much driven by the concept rather than I'm a performance boat designer supposedly, but I'm not a great believer in being driven by speed or performance, strangely enough. I mean, because that's easy. The hard bit is designing something that's quick to a handicap, to a rating, or within the parameters set again by the owner. I mean, it's no point in designing a fast stripped out boat if the guy actually wants a grand piano in the boat. You've got to take that into consideration, or else what's the point? It might not work out, but that's, you tell the owner that and they go, okay, that's fine, but I'll buy into the compromise. But I mean, designing a fast boat per se without rules, well, I mean, you know, I just think it's an extraordinary idea. I've never, frankly, annoys me. You know, and you know, people go with the America's Cup and they think how amazing these things are. Well, yeah, it's an amazing rule. That's the clever bit. You know, and of course that's, if you like, that's the revolutionary bit too. And I mean that goes back again to the change from RORC to IOR. That's a revolution. How you interpret it is evolution, very different. And I mean, the beauty of certain rating rules throughout history, and the meter boat rules are the same, is that you have this, although you have this loads of different ways of interpreting to come effectively to the same answer. So there's no wonder, again, the idea very much in the IOR heyday of level rating was so popular, because, you know, you could design a fat boat, a thin boat, a heavy boat, a light boat. I mean, I always think of Ted Hood, and I think, my God, I mean, who designed a 1-tonner that weighed 20,000 pounds, and somebody else has got, like Terrorist, is 10,000 pounds, and they're racing level. I mean, fantastic. To me, that is fantastic. To some people, it's an anathema, so that's fair enough. But the idea of just having a fast boat as such, without any regulations or rules or constraints on it, well, I mean, you know, how big's your checkbook? I mean, and I suppose we've seen that with boats like Comanche and boats like that, because that's what happens. I mean, if you want to go faster, you just go bigger and more expensive. Which is fine. But that in itself is a restriction.
Well, when you began using the fractional rig, I mean, because, you know, around here, the IOR minimum main was just what you did.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
All of a sudden, the Kiwis showed up with fractional rigs. Was that about the time you began using the fractional rig, or did yours precede those early Kiwi boats?
Well, the first hint I got of it as an idea actually was on one of the half-tonners that was developed at Strawberry Fields. So it would have been in '73, so slightly before Bruce Farr arrived. I mean, I know he'd already arrived in New Zealand, but he hadn't become, his design philosophy certainly hadn't reached Europe. And again, in those days, I know it sounds incredible, but you couldn't really find out what was happening across the world. You could, you know, if you happen to buy a magazine, it's potluck what would be in it. So no, but we did a half-tonner, which was a development to Strawberry Fields, and that had a sort of 15/16 rig on it, something like that. So not really fractional, and it was still very high aspect ratio main. But it began to give an insight into the idea of the rating benefit. Because again, that's the main benefit of fractional rigs. I mean, ultimately, it's rating rather than boat speed. It's boat speed to rating. It's the ratio, but the actual performance characteristics of a fractional rig aren't necessarily any better than a masthead rig. But yeah, I mean, the Bruce Farr and I suppose really, yeah, in European and to a lesser extent American terms, because it took longer to filter through to the American market, I think. But certainly his quarter tonner, chine, in '75, really started the big fractional thing. Although again, other designers with the quarter ton class, which was an extraordinary development class. There were other people doing fractional boats, Odd Job, Stephen Jones design, and so on and so on. But David Thomas was another one. I think basically in that era, '73, '4, it was beginning to happen big time. And I think it was the free rating, really. I mean, that's what got us all going. You suddenly think, oh, crikey, you know, we can have 10%, well, whatever the numbers are, but 10% more sail area for the same rating. It's got to work. It's got to be good. The nuances and the niceties of bending the mast and, you know, depowering it more easily. I mean, that really, those benefits came later as the whole thing evolved. It certainly wasn't the driving force behind it. It was all rule. I mean, you know, I've always said everything in our world, apart from cruising boats, is rule driven.
So on Wave Train, that's a huge main.
Yeah.
And that was rule driven.
I'm going to contradict myself now, aren't I? No. Well, the thing was that the IOR was still very alive and well then. In the early days of in this period, 88. But I knew that there was no way that this highly stable boat configuration would work under IOR, so that just never got a look in. There was a handicap rule called CHS, which then morphed years later into what's now known as IRC. It's the same rule, basically. But in the Channel handicap days, which is when Wave Train first appeared, it was, you know, it really was a finger in the air and, you know, kind of see where it goes kind of rule. But it, of course, it generated freedom.
Look at that. That's beautiful.
Yeah, that's as she is now. That's taken a couple of years ago.
Man.
So that's 30 odd years old there.
But, what's length overall?
32 feet.
And what's displacement?
About 6,000 pounds.
That's what I was just gonna guess. That's beautiful.
Well, and there's me racing it in a two-handed race.
And so under the IOR, what did it rate?
Oh, I didn't. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I hate to think.
No lumps and bumps.
But yeah, but the CHS, the rating office, the RORC rating office, really didn't like us at all. I mean, they actually tried to. They accused the owner of pot hunting. Which was ridiculous in a sense, because you can't design a boat to CHS really. So it was a bit of an absurd suggestion, but they actually offered to rate it IMS, which of course, again, it wouldn't have rated well IMS because it was so stable. And IMS, again, like IOR, rates and measures stability. So to get a low rating, you have low stability. I mean, I'm generalizing here, but essentially speaking, that's probably the biggest single problem with IOR. I mean, bigger than the bumps, bigger than the creases aft, bigger than the pintails, bigger than any of that was the stability. If you'd taken out the stability factor in the rule, then all the other things would have disappeared anyway. We would have ended up, in my humble opinion, we'd have ended up with a sort of TP52 style IOR boat about 10 years sooner.
Well, and Stefan said himself that trying to lengthen the waterline by having overhangs was the wrong way for him to go. He said he should have gone with more powerful sterns. So, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, sorry, who said that? That was
Boomer.
No. Oh, right, yeah. Sorry, who are you attributing that to?
That was Olin. He said that.
Oh, yeah.
No, he said that in the 80s or 90s. He said he went the wrong way. He said I got stuck too much on extending the waterline when I should have been going. You went with powerful sterns.
Yeah,
and that's you also went with fair diagonals. You had very fair holes, not a lot of lumps or bumps.
That's right. Yeah.
And then you talk about what a lot of people don't understand about fractional rigs is the control you get, especially in heavy weather, especially for the crew, and the ability to shift gears so much more. I found this out years ago in the 70s with the T-Bird, the Thunderbird, International Thunderbird. Just to control it, I could go out single hand and beat crude holes with the Thunderbird in my youth, but it was just all about control in heavy weather. I mean, just like you would twist a main in heavy weather, that gives you control. Sure. And it just.
Julian, speaking of the Thunderbird,
Yeah.
which was a single chine boat,
Yeah.
extremely successful around here because it was designed here. You've done a lot of hard chine boats.
Yeah, I have.
A lot
Yeah.
of them.
Again, yeah.
Talk about chines and the use of chines today. I talked to Mark Mills about a year ago, and he was an intern of mine.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And I was chatting with him, and I asked him about chines, and he sort of poo-pooed them, and he talked about a new boat. I said, "You can put chines on it?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, because the client expects to see chines."
See them. Yeah.
So
It is a bit
about
funny
chines.
that, nowadays it is a bit sort of comic, really. I mean, in a lot of instances, yeah. But again, I'm going to disappoint you, I think, because I certainly can't attribute chines to performance. The only reason I think it's right to say the first chine boat I did was the E-boat. But the only reason that I picked chines was that I wanted to make it possible for it to be built in aluminium or plywood, because I figured the way to a bit like a dinghy, a bit like one or two successful dinghy classes. If you can have different build systems, methods, whatever, you increase the number of boats within the class. I mean, the E-boat, over the years, I mean, I've sold, it's not that many, but I've sold about 100 sets of plans for it. So, I mean, again, if it hadn't been hard chine, one presumes that wouldn't really have happened. So again, I can't say any of these decisions were based on performance, I mean, or anything like that. And I mean, most people back in the day of the E-boat and David Thomas doing Quarto and one or two others like similar, they laughed at us basically because they figured, well, why on earth would you want to design a boat with angles on it? And of course, again, it was looked as a cheapskate option. Oh, the only reason it's that shape is because it's easy to build it. You build it out of flat panels and so on. So it's all about timing and what part of history you're in, and and the times and everything else. And it's quite, looking back now, I mean, I have to be honest. I mean, it'd be easy to say, oh well, I think they really do amazing things, but I'd be lying if I said that, because I don't.
When you did the E-boat, did you geometrically lay out those chines and sections for conic development, or did you just eyeball the shape?
No, it's pure eyeball. Yeah.
Well, that's a good segue. Julian, we got a question in the chat from Gareth, and he was curious that was trailering a consideration when you designed that boat?
Oh, very much so. Yeah, absolutely. The lifting keel, the trailer ability, the fact it could race IOR, everything created what it was. It was all fundamental to it, yeah. And a lot of them were trailer sailed. I mean, we wanted to encourage people to be able to go to different different one design regattas. And I mean, in the early days of the class, I mean, they even had a thing called the Traveller's Trophy, which was for boats that had traveled the biggest distance by road to get to the regatta. So yeah, very much so.
Thank you. And everybody else besides Boomer, who figured out that I released the block on unmuting, you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask Julian questions.
Yeah, ask questions, guys, and even if you think they're silly questions never end up being silly, and ask the questions as they pop up, because they sort of let the speaker know where you like to go and where the interests are. So knock yourself out with questions.
Yeah, put me on the spot.
Yeah.
Why didn't more people copy the lifting keel design?
Hi, Colin.
Why didn't more people latch on to the simplicity? It's a complex simplicity because the concept is so neat, and it could to my mind, should have been used in a much wider variety of boats.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's funny. I'll answer the question in a couple of ways. We lost business because of the lifting keel. Strangely enough, we got an awful lot because of it. But I mean, I know that the Glasgow-based sailors, of which Jock Blair had got a lot of connections and so on, refused to buy the boat because it had a lifting keel, because they didn't need it. You know, on the Clyde, they got plenty of deep water. So they saw it as just a phenomenon that was necessary on the Forth. And it got nothing to do with the boat. And of course, it was daft of me on retrospect, because if I'd just said, yeah, well, one of the great advantages with this particular lifting keel is that when it's down, it's a fixed keel.
It's a fixed keel.
It's identical to how you do it. And of course, it just didn't dawn on me. And I mean, I thought, why didn't it? You get so stuck in your ways. And I thought, crikey, all I needed to have said to Jock is, well, build them a fixed keel boat, doesn't matter. But we didn't. We didn't think of it. But I mean, why wasn't it copied? I guess, I don't know, really. I mean, as you know, we did no end of production boats with it, a whole Evolution range, which was something like half a dozen, well, no more than that, about 8 different designs. And slowly but surely. Sorry?
Evolution boats are your boats?
Yeah.
And the trailability. I mean, the adverts that were your dad taking the boat to Bulgaria or something. You know, it was the beginning of something which, you know, it keeps coming back in little waves. The idea of setting off with your caravan behind you, which also happens to be a boat, and going somewhere nice and so on. But
I honestly don't know. I mean, I suppose in some ways I'm glad lots of people didn't copy it and muscle in on the market. I mean, and so on. But I guess it was just thought to be wacky. It's hard to know. I mean,
but there's plenty of other lift keelers out there. There's plenty of more modern lift keel boats of one sort or another. I mean, where I live these days in Saint-Malo, shallow draft is very important. So there are an awful lot of shallow draft boats of one sort or another, but nobody uses the very neat, simple, inexpensive system that bang came out of your head.
I mean, I don't know whether it would have been worth it, but I mean, I suppose actually looking back to when it all began, I mean, it possibly was something that I should have patented. Not that it has been widely copied, as you say, but no, I guess
help us out here, because we don't know this system. Can you explain this system to us?
Yeah. Well, the point of it was that, again, it comes back to it being an IOR boat. So it had to have an IOR keel, no compromise. Plenty of people were doing centerboards or stub keels with centerboards or you know, shallow draft boats or this, that, and the other. I mean, that was obviously, you know, common. I mean, and there were some notably incredibly successful centerboard boats like the Finisterre class or Sparkman and Stevens and so on. But that's pre-IOR. But I mean, but it didn't fulfil the fundamental requirement. Nobody had, of saying, I want a pure IOR boat with a pure IOR keel, but I want to be able to retract it and pull it into the boat completely, so that the bottom of the boat is completely flush, so I can put it on a trailer with the minimum fuss. And I want it to be seaworthy enough, a system where if the boat capsizes or whatever, or gets out in really bad weather. I mean, they've made 4 transatlantic crossings, these boats, with a standard lift keel system in them. So it's proved itself to be pretty seaworthy. But I mean, all of those things brought into the concept, and the concept was simply that: take an IOR dagger keel, you know, very, very high aspect ratio, slight taper on the leading edge, slight taper in the sections, and find a method to lift it. Well, that's fairly straightforward. The difficult bit was, how do you get all of that high aspect ratio keel inside the boat because the boat has limited headroom and so on. So again, you had to think about that. So again, the idea was to create a top plate design, the support system inside the boat that was A, strong enough to not self-destruct when in extreme weather, but also would hold the keel in place like it was absolutely rigid. Because again, being a race boat, you didn't want the keel moving at all because that would have slowed it down. So it was the design is a tapered molding inside the hull into which a top plate sits, and then the top plate is compressed into the bottom of the hull by some lockdown bolts, which are controlled or tightened up from the middle of the box, where you can get at them easily. And it's, as Colin very kindly says, it's very simple to use. It's very robust, and lifting it up and down and so on. It's not a variable geometry boat. I mean, it's either fixed down or it's lifted up. It's one or the other. It surprised me that more people didn't do it. It's funny that systems that are not that dissimilar to it, of course, are now very much used on super yachts for obvious reasons, because I mean they have colossal drafts they want to get rid of. But that's really the only, if you like, legacy of the design idea of it being a no compromise keel. I mean, so yeah, I think that's it in a nutshell. We've got a drawing of it somewhere on my list of pictures, but but anyway, we might stumble across it at some point.
Hobie 33, one of the few that did the same. Very strong, very robust, lowered, bolted into place. I mean, they did drop test with that boat. It just amazing.
But that was a bulb keel. That didn't come up flush into the boat.
No, it didn't come up flush, but I'm talking about the robustness of coming down, T on top, that bolted down in place. Have you been aboard those, Bob?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah. They're pretty solid, pretty steady. No slop, no nothing. It's just way stable.
Yeah.
But it is a good way to have a robust centerboard design or drop keel design.
Yeah.
Julian's design almost takes a lot of keels have a plate widened to a flush plate that fits into the bottom of the hull, so that you're spreading the load rather than just being the top of the keel. The load goes over a wider area, a footprint area. You can almost imagine that Julian did that, but that bit is incorporated inside the hull and is held down rather than held up. So the keel, effectively, when the keel is down, it is as solid as any fixed keel out there.
Well, one of the things we wanted to be able to do with it was to say to owners, well, yeah, if you want to dry out and alongside, you can sit the boat on the keel.
Yeah.
Which of course, again, if you're wanting to scrub the bottom or whatever it is, it's a useful thing to be able to do. So the whole system is strong enough to support the entire weight of the boat. I mean, there are disadvantages in all of this. I mean, not least of all were my nightmare Monday mornings, when I'd come into the office and the phone would ring and someone would say to me, I'll just tell you a really interesting story. I sail in very shallow water area where Colin will know what I'm talking about, but I mean, it's called Chichester Harbour, and it's notorious for a bar, broken rough water in certain tidal and wind conditions. And these owners would say, oh, I love your boat because we're out at sea with the family on board and so on, and we just lift the keel, it's blowing really hard and we just lift the keel and we can get in. And I'm thinking, oh my God, no, you're not supposed to do that.
Well,
Omega 30 was another one that had a lifting keel. They used
That was a CNC
block
boat,
and
yeah.
tackle inside.
Yeah, yeah.
Very Spartan interior down below. If you've been aboard them, that very Spartan, but it worked quite well. The Hobie had a basically used a block and tackle, but what they designed wasn't very strong. In fact, in one case, up here at Shill Show, the owners were dropping their keel. They launched it, put it in the water, and it had a centerboard trunk that came up, and it had a flange on top plate that you bolted it down on, so it was above. Well, when they were lowering the keel, their tackle broke, and the whole keel came down, slammed on the top of the centerboard, and just the sound, that sound, it was so loud, it knocked them both out. Their wives were up, and they were going. They heard this. They went down. They found both husbands knocked out from the sound of this keel dropping and hitting the top of the trunk.
I mean, again, another element of the design of the E-boat, which we again used on all of the subsequent designs that followed it, which again, I think Colin will remember, is that it was an important part of from my point of view, that when the keel was down, you couldn't tell the boat had a lifting keel. So we had, the keel box only came up to galley height, and it was supported by the side of the galley. So when the keel box top was on and so on, it just looked like an ordinary boat inside. There wasn't a trunk going up to the coach roof or anything like that. We also had a method of lifting it, which could be dismantled extremely quickly. It wasn't a block and tackle or anything like that. So, again, it was just a relatively minor point, but it was trying to, make the boat not too compromised in its, in its overall concept. And we made that system work on quite a few designs over the years. So yeah.
You used a screw jack?
What, to lift it?
Yes.
No. So some people that probably got E-boats, if there are any on them, will probably all go, "Oh, we got rid of that years ago." But I mean, no, we designed them to be lifted by things called a turf oar winch, which I don't know, it's a brand name. It's used for in the outside world for fence pulling, and pulling down fence posts and things like that. So it's a ratchet winch, which, and the reason I liked it as an idea was that you winched the thing up and winched it down. I never liked the idea of doing it on a block and tackle or on a trailer winch or something like that, because of course the downside of it is not under control, or so much anyway, whereas the turf oar was a two-way winch, which I felt was safer. And then with the bigger boats we just went to hydraulics, and basically to get the travel, you have a hydraulic ram, and then on a reverse 2-to-1 tackle, so you double the travel, which again worked quite well. Big loads involved in it, but it worked pretty well. I mean, all these keels are vertical lift. I mean, that makes life so much easier. I mean, the moment you want to put some slope into the thing or whatever, then it all gets a bit more nightmarish. So it's keep it simple, really.
Cool. So when did you first start adding flare? I discussed this with you a couple of years ago, talking about Commodore Monroe's Prestos and with the flare. And you posted something of a boat down in New Zealand that had flare. And I noticed on like the wave train, the boat behind you on your screen, they'll have some flare. When did you first? What pushed you in that direction?
Well, of course, again, the extremely wide sterns. I mean, as in the picture behind me, yeah. I mean, that's this freedom of not being constrained by a rating rule that measures girth, aft girth, which IOR did, so it's again a byproduct. that particular boat you can see in the picture is a wave train, development of wave train. It's a production version. It's bigger. It's 36 feet. But again, we were in a way fooling around with how much beam you could put on the thing. I mean, it's 36 feet long and 14 feet wide.
So you're trying to get more power, and then the more you heal, to gain even more power as you heal.
Again, I'm going to be really honest with you and say, you know, it's not performance based. It's based on the concept of the boat overall, which was, you know, to win a few races under channel handicap if you could. But I mean, it's a cruiser racer. It's got 3 double cabins in it. You know, hot running water, blah 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 blah, the beam, without going excessively wide on the waterline, I mean, just enable one to get the volume inside it. But you keep the performance by having an extremely narrow waterline. And again, it worked very well. There are shortcomings. I mean, it's not the hottest boat in the world. That type of design going upwind in a chop and not a lot of wind. I mean, then it suffers. But upwind in a breeze, it's good, and of course off the wind, it's very quick. So yeah, I mean, if you were designing, well, again, it's rule driven, isn't it? Again, I mean, you know, if you were designing a boat to the America's Cup class rules, I mean, the thing becomes so narrow. I mean, they make a 12-meter look fat, and you know, slab-sided and so on. But again, it's rule driven.
So back in the 1890s, 1880s, when center borders were in vogue at that time, that's when the Presto was designed, and the biggest, it wasn't a complaint, but what they said to Monroe, well, doesn't your boat roll out when she heels, or if she takes a gust? And you never had any problem with any of them rolling out, eh?
No, I mean, I wouldn't say no problem, but I mean, we never felt the need for twin rudders or anything like that. I mean,
no control issues.
No control issues at all. I mean, that was I mean, you can't know these things in advance, but I mean, necessarily, but I mean, one of the joys of Wave Train herself was that, I mean, it was so drivable. I mean, so quick.
You can't win races with control issues.
No, exactly.
No,
Yeah.
no.
But we got protested in a regatta in Lymington in '88, actually, the first season, winter regatta, very windy. And basically we were protested for having a boat that's too fast for its rating. Well, I mean, nothing new there, but I mean, but of course, the rating is what it is, and and it's what you're given. I mean, and when you can't design to a rating, which you couldn't with that rule and with the CHS rule and so on, it's just what it is.
What's headroom in that boat?
About 4 feet.
Ah, and the keel is fixed.
Yeah.
It's fixed.
Pure speed is what I see in Wave Train.
Yeah,
but yeah, it annoyed people again because I mean they you know, again there was a protest, 2 boats too fast, blah 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 blah. I mean, I shouldn't, technically speaking, have even defended the protest, but I did, and I said, well, one of the reasons is that the races you're talking about, 4 out of the 6 races were held in 25 to 35 knots of wind. Gusting anyway, in winter, I mean, you know, pretty breezy, pretty big seas and so on. And I said, you'll note we carried full mainsail when nobody else did, and we were the only boat setting a spinnaker. So the fact that we won is probably more down to that than a fudged rating.
Very powerful stern section.
Yeah. And so anyway, the protest was thrown out. But yeah, that boat did create a great deal of ill feeling. And again, I mean, it's, you know, for what it's worth, it's all those years ago now. I don't know whether it's radical or what, but I mean, I wish it had the acceptance then that it has now. We didn't get a single order from that boat.
That's the question I was just going to ask. How many clones did you build from Wave Train?
Zero. Yeah. And what's more, the people that built it, I mean, and it was marketed as either to be built in timber again, if you wanted, or in glass. You know, we didn't actually get around to building a mold, but I mean, it was advertised, and it wasn't a lot of money. Don't know. It just didn't hit the sweet spot at all.
Boy, that's mind-boggling.
Yeah,
Somebody
it was for me.
Say, give me that in 50 feet, right?
Right.
You think that would happen? Well, let's get silly for a while here and talk about the car top carriers, because I want to hear that story.
Okay.
On that earlier.
How did that begin? Well, again, I designed, because of the E-boat again, I got a commission to design a little self-build kit boat for the Sunday Mirror newspaper, who sponsored it, and called the Mirador. And it was a huge success. I mean, they sold over 1,000 of those in kit form. But I got to know the people involved in it, and I was just asked this question completely out of the blue. Well, you're an aerodynamic, you know about aerodynamics, and so on. So we've come up with this idea of a roof box, a roof box on a car. Now, this was a long time ago. This was in 1980, 1981. And so I said, yeah, sure, I can do that. And I thought, well, okay, put a box on a car, it destabilizes it, et cetera, let's use Formula One ground effect thinking and aerodynamics to try to make something that doesn't destabilize the car. So anyway, it was designed, prototyped, and so on, and it was tested at a Myra, which was a wind tunnel automotive facility in the middle of England, and so on. And all the tests were done on different cars and all the rest of it. And the thing was developed in that sense quite well. And but then, as things happen out of your control, the person running the Sunday Mirror and the Mirror Group newspapers decided to axe all of these special projects, everything. They had golf products, they had sailing products, they had motor car products, blah, blah, everything got axed. So our project was returned to me, and they said, well, you can take all of the work, it's yours really, because it's your copyright, so you own the testing results. So I took it all away, and I said to a guy that lost his job there, and I said, well, look, if you ever feel like making a phone call to somebody to sell this product, because I said, I'm not a salesman, I'll never do it, feel free, and I'll give you 50% of the business. And so 12 years later, he picked up the phone and rang Tula. And the guy at Tula said, okay, that sounds interesting, come and see us. So we went to see them. They loved the idea of it because
what were they building at the time, Tula?
Well, ski boxes, but I mean, they were pretty kind of rudimentary. I mean, the ski box kind of idea, I think, actually began in about 1980, 81, that kind of era. And Tula, I think, are one of the inventors.
They did all the roof bars.
And they did the bars too.
Yeah, I think I had Tula bars for my windsurfer.
Yeah. So anyway, we went off to see this guy, and he said, "Yeah, this looks good." I didn't dare admit, because going to sell a new idea, that it's 12 years old by then. So I made up a story about the fact that we'd actually designed it 6 years previously. So he was suitably again surprised at that. But anyway, that resulted in us getting a commission for the design that's called the Vision, and they really bought into it big time, which was good. And but they also said at the same time, we don't want to do this radical design. How do you feel about doing something a bit less radical? So I I said, yeah, that's fine. You know, it's, tell me what you need, a mainstream product rather than to replace their mainstream product. The only problem was I thought, well, I don't really know what I'm doing here, you know, and so anyway, undeterred, I thought, well, I'm going to have to get hold of somebody that's kind of got a bit of knowledge about these things, you know, and so on, if I'm actually going to design it. And what was worse, that the Tula people said, well, look, we want choice. We're giving this to several other companies to come up with proposals. And we also want you to do 4 different versions of 4 different designs. Well, can you imagine the work involved in that? And I thought to my partner in all this, Peter, I thought, well, how the hell are we going to do that? And we got back to London, where my office was, and I just randomly thought, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll have to find somebody, a student. Well, a boat design student obviously wasn't going to cut it. So I rang the Royal College of Art, and some guy picks up the phone, and I tell him what I want. I assumed he was a staff member. Anyway, this guy said, come and see me. So right there and then, without thinking about it, that afternoon, we walked across Hyde Park, went to see this guy, turned out to be a student. And I told him what we were up to. And he said, oh, yeah, I can do that. And he was one of these magic people that you give him a pencil and you know, he could just sketch something. And in 3 seconds or 10 seconds, you've got this amazing looking object in front of you. Just, you know, it's a skill that some people have. So I said, well, okay, you're on. Here's the brief. I mean, you know, we hear all the ideas, but I mean, how do you actually kind of turn them into a shape that kind of people are going to buy into? And we've got to come up with all of these choices just because we have to give them choice. And so anyway, we all worked together on this, produced this folder of stuff, presentation folder. Peter and I bombed off to Germany again. And that was the beginning of an amazing relationship. I mean, they've sold, I think, in excess of 2 million of these things. The box previous to this one, this is the original aerodynamic one, but I mean, the so-called Evolution box at one point was the highest selling ski box in the United States. So it was, you know, it was a worthwhile little exercise.
I didn't know there was another one. Because around here we have a lot of ski areas around here, and boy, you see right. Tula boxes.
Did they pay you a license fee on each one?
Yes.
Good. That's what.
But it was a struggle, and I mean, and not on all of them. I mean, they were. I mean, the first design we did, which was in the first one that went into production, which was the one I'm regaling that story about, was 95, sorry, and it's still on sale today, albeit you know, it's been slightly modified, updated, and what have you. But needless to say, that deal number 1 was no royalties, no anything, and actually a very low fee. I mean, on the original one, because they said, well, you're in competition with other people, you're going to have to compete. So we thought, well, we got to get through the door. So we did. But after that, you know, that was successful. So after that, they became a bit more liberal, shall we say? So,
now, aren't you doing didn't you post one that like goes on the back of a Porsche?
Yeah.
That's a current project.
Well, sort of. I mean, the problem is that with one thing and another, I mean, you know, some of these projects they're like pulling teeth, getting them to commit to them. I mean, again, that was Tula again, and they did all the, you know, they did the graphic on the back of the car. It's an Audi, in fact, I think, and so on. But I mean, unless they can, you know, they're very difficult unless they can see that they're going to sell a certain number of these things. It might be a good idea, but you know, they don't actually want to do it. So you get so far with something, and then it kind of gets stuck. You know, from our perspective, from a designer perspective, really, you can't get involved in trying to move things like that forward. I mean, one of those projects was a boat box, you know, which because lots of people have said, well, it's just a natural boat, isn't it? I mean, you could, you know, and so on. And so I took that idea and thought, well, yeah, if you can make it stable enough, the boat bit, that is, when it's in the water, obviously, it could work. It's just about the right size. So we actually did come up with a design and the materials necessary to do it. I mean, in other words, hot moldable plastic foam sandwich. It's all integral. So I mean, again, perfect. So it can be you know, hot molded over a buck, which is how they're made anyway. The boxes, but the material that you're doing it in is two-sided with a foam core. So it's quite clever stuff, but so the thing is stiff and light and all the rest of it. Because a standard roof box, of course, is terribly floppy, which makes it not terribly suitable for being a boat. But again, they can't see that there's a big enough market for it. So again, it's one of those things that sort of sits there, and I doubt that it'll ever happen, really.
It's funny from the outside. You know, I imagine how those projects work, and I imagine much easier than you're explaining.
Well, I mean,
how about talking a bit about your power boats?
Yeah, I'll just tell a quick story about being easy or whatever. I mean, getting in over your head, because it relates back to computers and so on. One of the things that Tula decided to experiment with with this first design we did for them, which they'd never done before, but they machined the tool out of a solid block of aluminium. And of course, it was machined off a computer figures and so on, off the design, in other words, which back in 1994, I suppose it wasn't unheard of by any means, but I mean, it was relatively uncommon. And all we'd got for software was MacSurf. We hadn't got any of these fancy automotive, software packages that in those days cost upwards of £50,000 to £100,000 or whatever. We just got dear old MacSurf, and yet we had to produce machine-ready work. Oh boy, did that take time! Infinitesimal, imperfections in the drawing, of course, get immediately reflected on the tool, which again in turn gets reflected on the product. Oh man, it was a nightmare, but we managed it in the end. Yeah, but yeah.
Well,
I don't recall the prices on those first CAD programs. They're like you were using in the 80s there, Bob. What was that? $5,000, $7,000?
Yeah, it's a lot more now.
Yeah,
it's a lot more now. It's a lot more complicated too. So it's far more complicated than I need. That's a problem.
You could work it pretty quick. I remember coming to your office in '86 and working up a Preston design. You did well. Yeah, you said, yeah, let's look at it. And you drew it up just like that, and on a 70-footer in about it wasn't very long at all.
I'm a whiz at that shit.
Pardon?
I'm a whiz at that stuff.
Yeah, you are.
Hey, show us some motorboats, Julian. Come on, don't be embarrassed. We're not going to laugh at you.
Oh, I can show some motorboats. I got the pictures here. Let's do it.
All right, let's see them.
Okay, yeah.
I'm particularly curious about number 3 when we get to that one.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, most of this work is, as you can see, is in Dubai, Middle East, and so on. I mean, although that one isn't. Again, in the business, I don't know if this happened with you, Bob, but I mean, when I started this business, and for the first 10 years of it, all my friends would say, well, when are you ever going to get a proper job? Or design or do something that actually makes real money. And of course, you ask yourself that question. I mean, and which approach? And I've used both approaches. Do you concentrate on what you know? Do you go flat out designing race boats, or do you go flat out designing cruising boats, or do you diversify? Do you actually think, oh, hang on a minute, maybe I should spread the business into other things just in case something happens? And again, it's just one big experiment, really. And so the powerboat journey was really based on that. And that wasn't based on clients coming to me, because, I mean, at all. I mean, that was me thinking, this is probably a business I should get into, and how am I going to do it? So I headed to the Middle East, really. I mean, I had kind of quite funny, really. I'd already done my trip to the Far East, to Taiwan, following in Bob's footsteps and one or two others, but I was a bit late into it. So they all looked at me and thought, no, sorry, we're covered. You know, we've got designers to do this, that, and the other. And so I kind of left there, and I thought, well, where can I take this idea of designing powerboats that might actually get built? I mean, trying to sell designs to the powerboat builders in the UK, I mean, you know, impossible. I just thought, you know. So I went to the Middle East. I went to the Dubai Boat Show, got chatting to people, found a boat builder. He was interested, and again, we just got lucky, I suppose. And he said, yeah, we'll do that. We'll if you can build the tools for us, build the molds and everything else, design it and build the tooling, and ship the tooling over by next week, or whatever, we'll do it. So again, I agreed to it. Came up with some sketches and ideas, and they liked it, and they said, okay, go ahead. We found a boatyard in Lymington in Hampshire, in England, on the south coast, to build the tools, to build the hull and, you know, all the tooling, really, and shipped it out to Dubai. And they started to build them, and then one thing led to another. I mean, they built, I don't know, 4 different developments of that design, and then they built, you know, a stretched version of it. So it's pretty much all focused around that company, that one company in Dubai, what we've done. The exceptions on the screen, which is a boat that was built as a one-off in the UK, 48 feet, and twin harness and drives, you know, surface piercing props and all the rest of it, capable of about 50 knots. What I was trying to do, though, with the design, again, I was saying to myself, I want to design it like it's a sailing boat. So it's got to have side decks you can walk around, and little things like that. And obviously aesthetics are subjective, but I mean, I didn't want it to look like a layer cake or anything like that. So again, all driven by aesthetics and by practical issues, so that, you know, even at speed, you can walk around the boat and you don't have to, you know, you've got, you know, big side decks and a great deal of stability. And they're good sea boats, which is again part of the intention. But it's not really, you know, anything that's taken off it beyond that, pretty much.
Where do you get your hull forms from?
Well, again, as far as I was concerned, I had this big thing about narrow waterlines, or narrowish waterlines. I mean, make it easily driven, make it, I mean, if you like, the underbodies are, you know, borrowed from the Moppies and that sort of thing, the Bertram type boats, the amount of dead rise and so on, and the amount of rocker. There's nothing particularly original about that. But what I wanted to do was superimpose onto that, really, top-sides and so on, that would give me more beam at deck level and more structural rigidity. So they have very unusual sections. They come up from the waterline and they're concave, and then they step out, and then the upper part of the hull is convex, it's curved. So you get enormous amount of structural stiffness in it, fore and aft stiffness, and so on, and you get the bonus of a boat that's easily driven, but it's wide at deck level. And people look at it and think it looks a bit, it looks a bit odd or a bit different or whatever, but it works very well. So that's basically where the ideas come from. I mean, in its simplest terms, it comes from its powerboat interpretation of a sailing boat. Of the good features of a sailing boat. The thing on the screen now, I mean, again, it's just variety and so on. But I mean, for the centenary, the 2000, whatever they call that thing. I mean, in London, there was an awful lot going on, and one of the things that was going on was to produce a water bus service. And Virgin Atlantic and so on, who I happen to know somebody in there quite well, and they said, well, we're putting a proposal together for the riverboat service, and would you like to put forward a presentation for it? So for them to put it forward, I mean, so this is what I came up with, and it's a trimaran again. It's a push me pull me boat, so you don't have turnaround problems. The boat can dock facing either way. So again, you can speed, the docking facilities, and the docking times are reduced and so on. So again, we didn't get into designing it in detail. It was all conceptual, but quite a lot of thought went into it. And but Virgin didn't get the they didn't get the contract to run the service, so that was that really. So it's very interesting. But this is a picture of a boat we won. Volvo Penta, the engine manufacturers, and International Boat Industry, the magazine, ran a competition. I mean, everything was about what was going to happen in the year 2000. So again, in 1995, they ran a competition for a 2000 boat. What's the future going to look like? And it was a competition. Well, they had a huge number of companies enter it, and designers and whatever, and we won the competition. And this is the design we won it with. The idea was to produce a powerboat to use their engine. I mean, that was the fundamental reason why Volvo were involved in it, but with a very sort of 21st century twist to it. But we thought the idea of partial rib was a good idea, and then modular construction, so the same hull could be mass produced and different deck units could be put on. So we had a deck unit like this that could be dropped on, that looked a bit like a car, if you like. And then we had other versions which were more like, open ribs, and then another cabin version and so on. And but sadly, having promised us that if we won the competition, they would build it, Volvo didn't. So again, another one of those things that only got as far as the drawing. Again, no guesses for the origins of this. I mean, again, it's a commission from somebody that's been there, done it all before. I mean, a range of boats called the Fishers, which yeah. And the guy who started that company now lives in the south of France, and he came to me and he said, well, what we'd like to do is something which looks like this kind of look, the Fisher look, but combined with a hull form which is low drag, a low wash making hull form. And although that doesn't show in this picture, we came up with again an underbody which was sort of trimaran orientated, if you like, but that's what disguised in the sort of rather traditional upperworks. And we're still waiting for the go-ahead for that. I mean, I think
you could be waiting a while.
Waiting a while, yeah. Well,
he's not very good at paying people for the work they do for him either.
No,
Let's see, Julian. Let's see your dog.
She's gone. It's a Bichon Frise.
Oh, okay. Mine's sound asleep right here.
All right. What have you got?
I've got 2 Portuguese water dogs.
Oh, right. Oh, wow.
One's mine, one's my wife's. So
Oh, right.
now back
Okay.
up to that powerboat we just had up there, Joe.
What was that, Bob?
You had a powerboat up just,
Yeah, we'll share it again. Here we go.
that's nice.
Yeah, that's another one of the Al Yusuf boats we did. Al Yusuf is the company in Dubai. Yeah. And,
What does that cost?
oh heavens, I've no idea now. No, I don't know. I haven't a clue. Isn't that terrible? But and that's an adaptation of, again, one of the other designs, which might come up in a minute, which is a photograph of. Again, strictly speaking, that's another version of the people boat, with the Volvo, the prize winning, the thing we won the competition for, and again, which shows a little bit about what it's about. Yeah, that one. Yeah,
like that.
Yeah,
That was good.
and they're all, because they're into it big time over there, they all have sort of sport fishing elements to them. I mean, obviously depending on how they're equipped, but a lot of people use them for that, and they like the I mean, this is a good drawing because this shows another element that with twin consoles. And we built this in 2 versions. One was slightly smaller than this, with that clipper bow that you've probably seen on quite a lot of them. And then this was this is a development of it, which is slightly more fashionable, you might say, I suppose, with the upright bow. But the interesting thing about it, in multiple outboard engines, and it works really well, the twin console, which is not unusual, but I mean, it's but where you walk between the consoles, it's very, it's got a lot of deck space, a lot of and ideal again for sport fishing, and we sold one of those to the ruler.
Everybody else
Abu
hear
Dhabi.
Julian? Because I can't hear him anymore.
You can't hear me?
Yeah, I can hear him.
Yeah, we got him.
Yep. Yeah, I said we sold this one to the ruler of Abu Dhabi, which was pretty nice. So yeah, that's the powerboat story, I think.
What about some of your cruising sailboats? Your bigger boats?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, getting into my
The
territory.
Volant 47 that you posted up yesterday, that looked really, really cool.
Yeah, it's done for an American. Well, I had an agent in Chicago, and he got me 1 or 2 commissions from people in that area, and that was one of them. Again, trying to combine the, if you like, the wave train hull form, very, very wide aft, very wide beam overall, but then with one of my favorite things, which are deck saloons. But I've always thought that, the great thing about deck saloons is you need to be able to see out of them, and otherwise they're a bit, they're not so useful if you're still sitting down in the hull. So again, all configured around the idea, which again is all driven by beam. Again, beam is a wonderful thing because it allows you to have wide side decks. It allows you to have accommodation with the sea out deck saloon and so on, where it's still within the, the parameters of the coach roof, obviously, but you've still got a decent walk around it. And you get all sorts of freebies with lots of beam aft, like the twin aft cabins and things like that. It all actually work. So yeah, I think this is about the smallest size boat you can get away with it. And then we have, I suppose it all started. I mean, again, it's a funny story. I mean, way back, our first real cruising boat was a thing called the Sea Change 43, which we did in 75, I suppose it was, 43-foot cruising boat. And interestingly enough, I mean, again, it tells you that thing never turned down a commission or never turned down a brief, because the brief was, the guy was an architect who wanted to have this boat built, but he wanted to put his interior in it. And his interior was fairly extensive, shall we say, for a 43-foot yacht of the time. Yeah, that's it. And so he said to me, well, can you do it? And of course I thought, well, yeah, no problem. Why not? I mean, you know, you give me the interior and I'll design a boat around it. You know, it's at the end of the day, and I'm not being overly simplistic here. I mean, the hull's only an envelope. I mean, it's just my responsibility to make it an envelope that will actually sail. But anyway, he said, well, I'm really not sure about this, because it doesn't, you know, I've been, you know, I hate to tell you this, but I've been to one or two other yacht designers, and he said Fred Parker and Robert Clark and one or two other names. And he said they just refused point blank to have anything to do with it. They said it's impossible, it can't be done. So I said, well, you know, it's not up to me, is it? In fact, I said, I can give you a hull shape which will give you more space than you want, because it just so happens that, again, beam being my friend and lots of beam at the back end will give you your own estate room, and it'll give you space to put the bath in the boat, and you know, and all the other stuff. And I don't have a problem with the, you know, a decent deck house or whatever, because it's, you know, I think as long as it's designed and built properly, it'll be perfectly okay. And in a terrifying event that, you know, the big enough wave comes along and smashes it off, well, we'll design the interior and the deck structure so that the deck saloon can be sealed off from the rest of the boat with a conventional hatch system. So he said, yeah, well, that sounds fine. So yeah, that was our first major foray into these kinds of boats. And then later on, I mean, I'm a great fan of building boats in steel. So we did one or two biggish cruising boats in steel, and 50-footer and a 60-footer particularly. And again, deck saloons, enormous beam. I remember talking to a well-known yachty who Colin will know, David Kahn. He makes hydraulic backstays and hydraulic bits and components.
Seaway, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, he took one look at the drawings of it when he said, you can't design a boat that shape. It's just not possible. And I thought, well, why not? He said, well, cruising boats, they're supposed to be, you know, they're supposed to have slab sides, and they're supposed to be, you know. And I said, well, this one hasn't got slab sides. It's got as much flair as a Merlin rocket, but it doesn't mean to say it's not a decent cruising boat. So anyway, but again, you know, attitudes change. And I mean, these kinds of boats are, you know, they're very common these days with these enormously wide sterns and so on. And so, but also I'm unlike Arthur Fox, who I've written about recently, who says weight was something that only useful in steamrollers. I'm more of the Ted Hood philosophy, where actually weight's a bloody useful thing in displacement terms if you're going with a construction system and you're going with a fit out and so on that's going to be heavy, because there's nothing worse than having a light boat that's overweight. Much better to have a boat that's designed to be heavy in the first place. And again, that was, I suppose, again, a philosophy. I mean, I absolutely adored those Ted Hood, you know, Little Harbour 50s and things like that, with this, you know, the deep bellies and the centerboards and so on. I thought, to me, that was a marvelous way to design a boat. So again, I took a little bit of that and did my own spin on that, really, I suppose, and thought, well, you know, it's not really being too risky, because it's actually all been done before.
Did you ever meet Arthur Fox?
No, I didn't. No. And in fact, funnily enough, I mean, I know it's another part of what I enjoy writing these articles for Seahorse. So he was the last one I did, which was about the fourth or so. It's kind of got a slight similarity to what you're doing with this, but only writing articles for Seahorse. But no, it was interesting researching. I mean, obviously I've heard of him and so on, but he wasn't one of those people that inspired me, you know, at all when I was starting off. I just didn't relate to what he did. So it was very interesting writing the article a few months ago, because I thought, oh, wow, you know, I wish I'd actually had allowed myself to read more about him and understand what he was about, because I mean, some of the stuff obviously would have been hugely beneficial, but you know, you live and learn. And as I say, he sadly passed me by as an inspiration, which is, you know, sounds very arrogant, I suppose, but I mean, it's just one of those things.
Well, he was influential on me in terms of, you know, I went on. I still write for Sailing Magazine. I've been doing that for over 40 years.
Right. Yeah.
Longer than anybody's ever done it. But you know, as a kid, the yacht club I belonged to had that collection of Ethel Fox books, right?
Yeah.
And one after another of us would try and steal them, and then one of the other kids would remember who had them and turn them in.
That's right. Yeah.
But I had those at home for several months before somebody figured out I had them, and I devoured those books. Just devoured them.
Well, I wish I had now, but you know, but I didn't. Yeah.
One of the things that you two have in common is the boat.
I got this right. I've got it right
here.
Both did. It's never far away from me.
The only way I first heard of Bob Perry was boat reviews. Then I noticed, hey, hang on a minute, I'm off to Taiwan to visit Tashing. Well, Perry did lots of boats there, and so you start putting bits of a jigsaw together. But reviewing boats, I think, is a you know, big. It's very useful, isn't it, in your careers, if you can use it the right way.
Well,
I used it to pay the rent.
Yeah, well, that's right. Yeah.
I figured my pay from Sailing Magazine over the years pretty much kept up with my rent payment, and one day a month I'd sit down and pay the rent.
That's right. No, Doug Peterson again once said to me, he said, when I was working on Seahorse, he said, I know what you're up to, Julian. You know, you get all these, you get all of us designers, Ron, you know, Olin, you know, Herman Frères, etc., Dick Carter. You know, they send you all our drawings. He said, I do, you know, and he said, and I know what you're up to. You've got some massive kind of system, computer or whatever, because, you know, and your way of analyzing everything we do so that you can design and boat, you know, a combination of all of them. And he was being well, he wasn't really being that serious, but I mean, but it's quite funny. Yeah, you do get access, as Colin said, you get access to an awful lot of things. I mean, in the era when I was testing boats, which was always a rather farcical thing to do, but I mean, you take them out for a 3-hour sail and then you're supposed to write knowledgeably about how amazing or otherwise they are. But you do learn a lot. Yeah. I mean, about, you know, what works, what doesn't work, etc., particularly when it comes to production boats.
Well, there was a time when I got a lot of designers' drawings, and some designers would send me damn near the whole set of plans, all the working drawings. And these days, all I get is total shite from marketing departments and the art department, and the drawings don't agree with each other, and one sail plan doesn't have any standing rigging on it, and you know, the hull numbers don't match up, and it's
oh really? Yeah.
It's awful.
I wonder what our brethren were up to these days.
Well, I'm down to, I just write about 2 boats a month now, and it's hard for them to keep funneling me stuff that's interesting to review because the current crop of production boats are so boring.
Yeah. No, I mean, talking about doing drawings or again following briefs or trying to do too much detail, I was, along with, you know, Che Blythe, that was doing his I don't know, it was his 2nd or 3rd range of round the world steel racing boats to race the wrong way around the world. And he decided, not a bad idea, to get a whole bunch of yacht designers into a room in Earl's Court, the boat show place, and we were all there, really. I mean, a lot of us, Ron was there, and Herman Frares, and Dave Pedrick, and Ed Dubois, and anyway, there were. I do remember. I can't remember everybody, but I mean, I do remember the numbers. There were 21 of us in all, and Che gave his speech, and he said, "This is what I want. I want it to be about 70 foot long, whatever. It's got to obviously sail the wrong way around the world against the prevailing winds. Got to be built in steel." And he said, "That's really all I'm going to tell you." And he said, "What I want you to do is just do a sketch. And I mean, of what you think you'd like to do." And so, I mean, you think to yourself, well, how do I just do a sketch? I've got so much to say. And he said, I won't, you don't go into any detail or anything like that. But I just couldn't resist. I thought, no, this is heaven sent. Get this. I've got some ideas. I want to tell him what the ideas are, and I want to illustrate it. So do drawings and do all of this sort of stuff. Well, I, along with just about everybody else, did the same thing, apart from Rob Humphreys, who did a sketch. And guess who got the commission? Rob, because he listened. And I thought that was a lesson if ever there was one. And somebody asked you for a sketch.
How old is Rob Humphreys?
He's about the same age as me. 70.
You're 70.
Mm.
Yeah, I've always liked his designs.
Mm. Oh yeah, it's great. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Is he a nice guy?
He's a very nice guy. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And just a sweet touch.
Yeah.
But a very genuine, gentle guy.
Yeah. He is, absolutely. Yeah.
And he survived all that bullshit with the oyster keel falling off.
Oh God, I feel sorry for him in that situation. I mean, God, I mean, these things are quite complicated. Maybe why they happen. I mean, and that I don't know really. I mean, it sounds like more like a lamination material failure.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, I think as designers, though, but it's mainly the builders. But I think as designers, we've got to take some responsibility for certain things. I mean, I'm not a fan, and I've done it sometimes, but of bolting keels onto the bottom of boats, just with a series of bolts straight onto the bottom, the hull and so on. But I'd certainly never do it on a cruising boat. And the problem is that boats, production boats, they're built in vast numbers, and then they end up filtering into the system, and God forbid they become charter boats. And I mean, I'm thinking of a certain Beneteau in that case. And I mean, it ends up, it ends up in a situation that, it shouldn't have been in when you view the situation as a whole. I mean, any boat that runs the risk of running aground as a matter of course should have a keel designed so that it can take that kind of punishment. And it's not difficult to do. I mean, but having a keel like an IOR or IRC keel that just simply bolts onto the bottom of the hull, I mean, is ludicrous for a charter boat that by its very nature, is designed. It has to, it's going to be run aground by people that don't know what they're doing. I mean, and you can't haul it out the water all the time. It's just not going to happen. Not in the real world. So I do think that is a design responsibility, not a user responsibility. And again, it reminds me again of a story. I was incredibly fortunate. The year that the E-boat first appeared in the London Boat Show, it attracted a guy, came up to the stand and said to me, I was on the stand at the time. He said, "Oh, could you design a bigger version of this? Because for sunbathing on, And I thought, well, fair enough. It's a performance cruiser racer, but if you want people to sunbathe on it, I suppose having a nice flat deck's a good starting point. So I said, yeah, sure. and what he turned out to be, he was the guy that started Flotilla Holidays, a guy called Eric Richardson, and it was Yacht Cruising Association. He basically invented the idea of Flotilla Holidays, but he decided he wanted a more performance-orientated boat, and this is long before Benettos and those kind of people got into the picture. And but again, he gave me the most intense brief imaginable. And I mean, just to give you an example, the boat had to have tumble home. The reason it had to have tumble home was because the punters, or whatever you like to call them, don't know what fenders are for. So you've got to be able to build it and design it in such a way that the boats can actually bang together and not get too damaged. So the guardrails don't get damaged. This is what it's again, one of these stories that just always reminded me, always listen to the brief. The people always have these extraordinary reasons for wanting things the way they want them. And another one, which comes back to the cheeky Rafiki story, he said they're always running aground. So the keel you must put a step in the deadwood so that if the keel hits something, it's going to be front on at speed, it doesn't strain the bolts. The load goes straight into the structure. And I thought, well, that's a bloody good idea. It wasn't my idea. I was just responding to the guy with the experience. So, I mean, you could run the thing into a brick wall and it wouldn't actually do any harm to the structure. And again, it's simple things, and again, boats, like everything, really have to be used in the way that they were designed for. And I mean, it's dodgy, and this is a problem with production boats when they start being used for things that they were never originally designed for.
Yeah, but if you're a designer and you're working with Beneteau, for instance, the designer's not going to tell them how to build the keel.
No, I know, but it's a relationship that's a relationship's a bit, a bit, risk dodgy, isn't it? As that incident proved. I mean, I don't know.
You're right, Julian, that it's this sort of spin on from things, because Beneteau, for example, never imagined the firsts really as a charter fleet. They had other boats which are aimed at charter.
Yeah.
The firsts were aimed at, racing owners, racer cruiser owners. But then we get the race charter market, which particularly in Britain has become huge, with these boats which are having a hard season in Europe in the summer, and then going to the Caribbean and coming back. Maintenance time is very limited. They land up with quite inexperienced people very often doing the deliveries and looking after them and so on and so forth. And the boats they're going through something that nobody ever thought they were going to go through. Yeah,
that's absolutely right. And and fortunately, it's not a problem that causes too many issues, but it's there. It's definitely out there.
I have a question.
Building on that point with, I have a J88 from J Composites.
Right.
And we've had endless problems with both the transom and the rudder. And in fact, I was just on the phone just now to somebody who had their rudder break this autumn. But people go through multiple rudders and transom rebuilds. And we've also had spar problems with the Seldom rig. And they said that it was never spec'd as a racing boat. It was spec'd as a day sailor for the US market. Obviously, it's a US design.
It shouldn't be any different.
And we race them very hard. We race them hard. I've done sort of 250 races in mine, and in all weather, and we've had a lot of technical problems. Anyway,
no, it is a problem, but big manufacturers. I mean, because I don't want to name names, but I've heard the story before where the fallback position is the boat wasn't marketed or wasn't intended to be raced seriously. And then there's this really grey area. What exactly does that mean? But it doesn't really matter. I think Bob was probably going to allude to the point. It doesn't really matter whether you're racing a boat or not. You don't want the bloody rudder to fall off. And that it may happen without the exertions of racing. I mean, the weather can be bad enough on its own without the added pressure of racing.
I don't separate between cruising boats and racing boats, or I designed to the same. I figure whether it's an Islander 28 or a Valiant 50, somebody's going to take their boat offshore.
Exactly. Yeah.
Somebody's going to race the boat, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
It's just gonna
Somebody's
happen.
going to go across Chichester Bar with the keel up. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have two questions. Gavin, where are you selling your J88?
We race it out of the Hamble. I actually have more than one boat. The one that I have a Spartan and Stevens one that's in the background, the picture here. And I race a Sunfast 3600 also out of the Hamble, two-handed.
So I've just begun sailing with a fellow who just has bought a J88. It's in Annapolis, Maryland.
Yeah.
The boat has been successfully campaigned in the past. This is a very inexperienced owner, but I'm happy to hear about the problems. We haven't sailed it in a lot of breeze yet, but that's
we've had less problems with the US built boats than the European, because they have a deal with J Composites to build the European ones.
Yeah.
But when it started in the UK or in Europe, the first boats that came were the US built ones, and they also had Hall Spar rigs, which were better than the Selden rigs.
Yeah, and this does have a Hall Spar on it.
Okay. So the rig is better. I'd be interested to know whether the transom and the rudder, which take a lot of strain on that boat, and it's quite a delicate boat to sail, whether the US ones are better. But in Europe, every race J88 has had a transom rebuild without, every one of them.
Yeah, I think there are only two of these boats on the Chesapeake Bay. I'm not familiar with the second boat. This boat has been in Annapolis for some time.
I think the biggest fleet is in Chicago. I think there's quite a big group in Chicago, and there's some race down in Key West, I think. But anyway,
Hey, Gavin, tell us about that big S&S boat behind you there.
Well, I'm involved with the S&S group, as I think Julian knows, because I see him on Facebook.
Indeed.
But I've had S&S Swans in parallel to other stuff for 35 years. I was a yachting journalist, a bit like Julian, on a startup magazine called Yacht and Boat Owner that came out of Small Boat magazine based in Croydon, a cultural centre of the universe. And I did a test on, I think it was a She 36 and a Tartan 10 in long time ago, and thought that this was a really lovely boat, but it would be better if it was built by Nautor, Nautor Swan. And so I bought, when I was fairly impecunious, I bought a Swan 37 in 1985, 86, which was built like a battleship. It was a 1-tonner, built based on the boat that won the 1-ton cup, which was Rainbow 2 or something.
No, I think it was Pathfinder. I think it was called that particular design. I think, but yeah.
Anyway, you may be right, Julian.
Yeah.
And then I've had them ever since. So I had a 41 after that with a Swan deck, a Swan 47, a New York Yacht Club 48. Was called with a centerboard. And this one behind me is the Swan 76, which is what I have now. This is in Cowes a couple of weeks ago. And that's a centerboarder too. So, but it's not the complicated. It's a centerboard that swings back into the keel. So it draws just under 2 meters with the centerboard up, and about 4.7 with the centerboard down. But it actually is a very nice cruise. It's more cruiser than racer. I mean, it's based on Keeloa 3 loosely, which was an Olin design, and I think the draftsman was and Julian might know him or know of him, called Mario Tabuki, or
indeed,
Tarabacchio.
Who worked with Olin on some of the America's Cup work. And anyway, he was apparently the person who did the legwork on the Swan 76.
He drew lines there for years.
So I have a technical question as well.
At S&S.
I'm not a designer, so don't be too technical.
No. It was a technical question for both Julian and for Bob. The question is this: when you are typically developing a new design, and you've developed a basic appendage plan form, are you typically using a standard NACA section?
Usually, yeah. I mean, but and if for no other reason then it's easier. I mean, and you can understand its characteristics. So again, when it comes to doing a rudder, for example, you might want to sort of good anti-stall characteristics. So you'd pick a particular section, and of course then you fiddle around with the aspect ratio of it, the section.
Right. I have the same book, Bob.
It's always close by.
I think there you go.
Oh, right. Yeah.
For me, it just depends on the boat. I would like to start with a foil I've used a lot, and I'll go as far as I can, but oftentimes I have to change it for some pragmatic reason. Rudders, if a boat has a skeg, that totally buggers up the rudder foil.
Right.
And so I try and do as many spade rudders as I can, so I don't have to worry about fairing the blade into a skeg. Keels, it depends on if it's internal ballast or external ballast, or, you know, on the carbon cutters, that client wanted a full keel. And when I drew the boat, I cut as much of the keel away as I could and tried to convince him that's a full keel. Well, he didn't quite buy it. He wanted me to add a little bit onto the leading edge. So I did. I mean, he didn't know squat about it. Here he was telling me what to do. But I did that. But then I had to figure out how thin a foil I could go to on a full keel boat. And I went with 9%. And it turned out to be plenty. I mean, it turned out to be a lot of volume, got an internal ballast all on the bottom and the tanks all in it. So it turned out good and the boat sails great, but you know, you run VPPs and try different things, and in the end you guess. You guess what'll be the right solution that'll cover a wide range of sailing conditions.
That sounds like ORC to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bob's right in another way too. I mean, it does so much depend on how the boat's being built. I mean, you have to use, you know, the only ideal world situations really exist with pure racing boats. Outside of that, the moment you get into production territory and so on, there are compromises. I mean, they're not necessarily internal ballast or anything like that, but I mean, again, even the planned form of the keel, I mean, it won't be optimum from a performance point of view, but equally well, if it's going to be manufactured in such a way that the tolerances aren't going to be so good, then you need to use a fairly forgiving section. There's no point in putting some terribly fancy bucket section or so-called bucket section keel, knacker bucket section keel on it, if the hollows are going to get fed out by a boat builder who doesn't understand it.
Well, I mean, that was going to be my point. I mean, I spent most of my earlier years and even today sailing dinghies, and back in 1986 had a boat built, was the seventh of a series of 7 boats that were designed by Bruce Kelly.
All right, yeah.
It was called a Mirage 338. And we sailed the boat for 6 months and then just determined that the kind of performance that we were expecting out of the boat, upwind was not there. Downwind, it was a rocket ship at the time. And it took me 2 months to convince Bruce to release the NACA section on it. And when we finally got that section, we did a set of aluminum tape templates, interpolated it to the keel plan form, faired it completely, did it properly, and the boat took off like a rocket.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, I'll remember the section forever. It was a 65A 010 section. And it was fantastic.
Yeah. But you've got to get that. That's the sort of section that you do have to get right.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
If you would ask me for those templates, you'd have them in 5 minutes.
Oh, but Bob.
There's no point in me not giving you the stuff to make the boat go fast.
No, exactly. Yeah.
Why am I going to hold that back? Here, knock yourself out. I have special drawings for full-size templates for owners. You know, happy to provide them.
I mean, it reminds me of a story it came out not that long ago. I mean, whether it's apocryphal or not, I don't know. But the current owner of Valiant, the dear old 12 meter, which Olin wasn't too happy with for various other reasons, but it turns out quite a lot of her performance deficiencies were due to the fact the keel was asymmetric, and they hadn't discovered that in the heat of America's Cup racing. I mean. Just amazing.
I did a 38-footer for West Sail just before they went out of business, and the boat they built half a dozen of them, and then the boat went to Taiwan and got built under a different name. But I went down to check the plug at West Sail, and I looked at the keel, and they had the foil on backwards, literally. Well, got a small problem here. And I did a 17-foot day sailor for a company too, and brought the first boat to Seattle, and it was by my office, and I let him put the dagger board and gear in my office so it wouldn't get stolen. And I'm looking at the dagger board one day thinking, wait a minute. He had the foil on backwards, but it was a long high aspect ratio board with very little taper, so I just could stick it in the other way, and it worked just fine. But I've had him put it on backwards.
Both of you mentioned the difficulty from a designer as to what happens after you've done the design. And it just reminds me of Ed Dubois' sort of comeback in race boats. Was a boat called Full Pelt, 1 tonner, the higher rating 1 tonner, which I think Neville Hutton built probably in Leamington, but Joe Richards was involved in it. And the boat turned out to do very, very well, including winning the Fastnet in '87. And a Turkish owner ordered a copy, said, I want that boat, I want another one of those. And Malcolm from Ed's office had to scuttle down and start measuring the boat, because Joe and Neville had altered so much during the lofting and build that it bore precious little resemblance to the original plans.
Well, yeah. I mean, it can happen. I mean, one of my successful boats is a boat called Glass Onion class, and I mean, yes. and a few of them have been built. But there are no drawings for that. There's not even a hull lines plan.
And some people have even in a drunken fit cut the stern off.
Yeah, well, mad. Oh, well, yeah, quite. But that's to make a different boat. But yeah, I mean, if you asked me for a lines plan, I couldn't give you one because there isn't one. But yeah, it's fun. I mean, another little thing, I mean, you never know what's going to happen. Going back to roof boxes very briefly, when we did the wind tunnel test for Tula, for the design, for the designs they built, they wanted the wind tunnel test. We actually found that quite a few of the boxes, actually tested faster backwards. So, yeah.
Well, they used to claim some of those 12-meter tank models towed faster backwards.
All right. A Yachting World won of a design rally at Leamington, which must have been something like 1981, where they had all sorts of boats like the Swan 371, and Julian will know Sigma 36, and Red Admiral, and a Vauquier Praetorian 35, which was a Holman and Pye, and so on, and the Baltic 37, the CNC Baltic 37. Bob, you had Rob Ball on the other day, and the Dutch distributor had his own Baltic 37 there, and the motoring test, a bunch of Dutchmen drinking Geneva, motored the boat in reverse up the Leamington River faster than any other boat in forwards.
Oh dear.
with PG Johansson on board, and PG has been a friend since
steering. It might have been challenging.
Well, they were Dutch and they'd been drinking.
Yeah. All right, well, I think we'll close it down now. We could be for 2 hours, Julian. Might be
Yeah, well,
your bedtime.
I didn't quite get the record, but
No. Thank you very, very much.
no, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Very interesting.
Thank you both.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Appreciate it, Julian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Joe's up there. Thank you, Joe. You do a great job.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Yeah, it's great.
Yep.
You're the man. All right, Julian, I'll see you on Facebook.
Yeah, indeed.
you.
Okay, take care.
All right.
Likewise.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.